Hey there. Get ready for a deep dive into cultural celebrations in the U.S. You've sent us some really interesting stuff on this, including this one piece originally in Spanish that really makes you stop and think.
It's fascinating how this particular source tackles some common assumptions head on. It's going to be illuminating to unpack their perspective.
Okay, so let's start with something I think most of us are probably pretty familiar with at this point. Juneteenth, June 19th. It marks the day enslaved people in Texas finally learned they were free a full 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Wow.
Right. Talk about a reason to celebrate. But here's where things get really interesting. The source we're looking at doesn't just disagree with celebrating Juneteenth. They offer like a really thought-provoking critique that also applies to Hispanic Heritage Month.
Interesting.
Yeah, and what's their reasoning, you ask? Well, they argue that by singling out specific groups, even with good intentions, we might unintentionally be reinforcing the very divisions these events are meant to bridge.
That's a really important point. The source argues that labeling certain groups as minorities inherently creates a hierarchy, even if unintended, leading to a sense of my people versus your people. And that's something they see as hindering the development of a truly unified national identity.
It's like by shining a spotlight on differences, we might be inadvertently drawing lines instead of erasing them, right?
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it raises the question, how do you acknowledge and celebrate the richness of different cultures while also fostering a sense of unity and belonging for everyone? It's a balancing act that many diverse nations grapple with.
It really makes you think. And we're back, taking a deep dive into cultural celebrations in the U.S. You know, this source makes another really interesting point. They say these kinds of celebrations, while well-intentioned, can sometimes feel a bit superficial.
Right. The source argues that these events, instead of fostering genuine cultural exchange, can sometimes feel more focused on commercialization. Think about it. How often do we see cultural celebrations co-opted by marketing campaigns?
It's like that old joke about Doritos for Hispanic Heritage Month, right?
Exactly. And when cultural recognition becomes entangled with marketing, it's easy to lose sight of the true meaning and significance behind these celebrations.
It's almost like we're putting these communities in a box, even if it's a beautifully decorated, heritage-themed box. Speaking of boxes, this reminds me of the article you found in the LA Times about the representation of Hispanic communities in the media.
Oh yeah, that's a great connection. The LA Times piece paints a pretty bleak picture. It highlights how Hispanic communities are often relegated to narrow and often harmful stereotypes, like being overly associated with criminal activity or poverty. You rarely see the incredible diversity within the Hispanic population reflected authentically on screen.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to squeeze this vibrant tapestry of cultures and traditions and experiences into a tiny box that doesn't even come close to representing the richness and complexity of these communities.
And that brings us to a crucial concept in sociology, the other. By constantly emphasizing differences, even with good intentions, we risk reinforcing this sense of us versus them.
So even when we're trying to celebrate diversity, we could be inadvertently deepening the divide.
That's the danger. And this us versus them mentality can have real and harmful consequences in how we perceive and interact with each other in our everyday lives.
This is giving me a lot to think about, I've got to say. We're unpacking some heavy stuff here. What does this source ultimately hope to see? We'll be back right after this. Just kidding. We're going to keep going. We'll be right back to explore that question and more, so stay tuned. I mean, don't go anywhere. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay, let's get back into it. So after all that, where does this source want us to go from here? What are they hoping for?
Well, ultimately, I think they yearn for a U.S. where everyone is seen as equal, where education dismantles prejudice, and where shared opportunities foster a genuine sense of belonging for all.
Yeah. It's kind of a powerful vision, right? Everyone on the same team working together.
Right, and it makes you realize that achieving true inclusion requires going beyond just celebrating our differences. We need to dismantle the systemic inequalities that cause these divisions in the first place.
So it's more than just a month or a special event. It's about creating a society where everyone has an equal shot no matter what.
Exactly. It's about equal access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities, and that takes continuous effort from everyone.
This has been a really interesting conversation. So what are your thoughts on all of this? How can we celebrate heritage but also have a unified country? How we move past just checking boxes to really understanding and appreciating each other?
These are tough questions. And while there are no easy answers, maybe true belonging begins with recognizing our shared humanity. recognizing the historical context and then working towards a future where everyone feels valued and respected and empowered to reach their full potential.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. And this source left us with one very provocative thought. They don't like that the U.S. Census categorizes people into racial groups at all. Is that categorization itself part of the problem? Or is it a necessary tool to measure progress towards equality? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's certainly given me a lot to think about.